Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back to Wolf Secret. Before we begin today's story, I want to sincerely thank every one of you who continues to watch, support, comment, and spend your time with us. Every view, every message, and every quiet moment you choose to stay with these stories helps Wolf Secret continue to grow. Here, we have shared stories about powerful alpha kings, gentle omegas, mysterious mate bonds, hidden identities, and the kind of love that can heal even the loneliest heart. But today's story begins with something a little different. An old royal tradition said that any woman who caught the king's beloved parrot would earn the right to become his future queen. Naturally, every noblewoman in the kingdom wanted to win. They brought expensive fruit, jeweled cages, and carefully prepared tricks. But the royal parrot ignored every one of them. Instead, it flew straight past the waiting ladies, crossed the palace gardens, disappeared through a servant's corridor, and landed on the shoulder of a kitchen maid who had no idea a queen selection was even happening. What followed would embarrass the royal court, challenge an alpha king's carefully controlled heart, and prove that fate had a very strange sense of humor. So, make yourself comfortable, stay with me, and let's begin. Everyone in Alderwyn knew the old saying, catch the royal parrot, and you could become queen. For generations, the tradition had been little more than entertainment during the Moonfeather Festival. The royal bird would be released above the palace gardens, noble daughters would chase it beneath silk banners, and the court would laugh when the stubborn creature escaped them all. But that year, the game became dangerous. Alpha King Rowan Duskvale was 39, unmated, and entirely tired of hearing about it. He had ruled Alderwyn for nearly 15 years. 12 packs answered to his command. Border lords lowered their voices when he entered a war council. Noble alphas who argued for hours with one another became remarkably cooperative after one look from his cold silver eyes. Yet none of that power had protected him from one persistent enemy. Marriage proposals. They are becoming creative, Rowan's advisor murmured as servants arranged tea beneath the palace pavilion. Rowan watched 32 elegantly dressed women gather across the autumn gardens. That concerns me. One family sent you a portrait painted on silk. I burned it. I know. Another servant quietly hid a smile. Rowan leaned back in his chair while cool October wind carried the scents of fallen leaves, cedar smoke, expensive perfume, and roasted chestnuts across the festival grounds. His wolf had been restless for months. The council claimed marriage would solve that. Rowan strongly suspected the council simply wanted grandchildren to argue over. So he had revived the ancient Moonfeather tradition with one carefully chosen condition. Any unmarried woman who caught Percival, the royal parrot, before sunset would earn the right to enter a 30-day courtship trial for the position of Luna. The nobles had been delighted. Rowan had been even more delighted, because Percival hated everyone. The emerald green bird had bitten 3 physicians, chased a foreign ambassador into a fountain, and once stolen the royal seal directly from Rowan's desk. No one was catching him. The contest began at noon. For the next hour, Alderwyn's most accomplished noblewomen abandoned dignity with impressive speed. Lady Celestine Vale offered imported figs. Percival dropped one on her head. Lady Marissa brought a jeweled cage. Percival sat on top of it and screamed until she cried. 2 sisters from Northmere tried surrounding him with silk nets. He escaped between them and stole a pearl from one woman's hair. For the first time in weeks, Rowan almost enjoyed himself. This may be the finest decision I have made all year, he said. His advisor sighed. Your Majesty, you are enjoying this too much. I have earned it. Then the kitchen door opened. A young woman stepped into the garden carrying a tray of warm cinnamon pastries. She wore a plain brown dress beneath a flower-covered apron. Loose chestnut curls had escaped around her face, and a pale streak of flour crossed one cheek. She was not watching the contest. She was not watching Rowan. She was whispering angrily at one crooked pastry. You had one job. Percival froze in mid-flight. Rowan's amusement vanished. The bird turned. Its dark eyes locked onto the kitchen maid. Then, it launched itself across the garden. Ladies screamed as green wings swept over jeweled heads. The maid looked up just in time for Percival to land directly on her shoulder. Silence crashed over the garden. Percival shoved his head into her apron pocket and stole a piece of cinnamon crust. The young woman stared at him, then at the hundreds of people staring at her. Finally, she lifted one hand. Does this bird belong to someone? Rowan's wolf rose beneath his skin. And for the first time that day, the Alpha King stopped smiling. Elsie Hart had spent most of her life trying not to attract attention. Unfortunately, the royal parrot had just destroyed that ambition in less than 10 seconds. The palace garden remained completely silent around her. 32 noblewomen stared, as though Elsie had committed a crime against the moon itself. Servants stood frozen beside tables of wine and fruit. Musicians had stopped playing. Even the autumn wind seemed quieter as Percival balanced comfortably on Elsie's shoulder and continued searching her apron pocket for crumbs. Elsie slowly looked at the green bird. "You've caused a problem, haven't you?" Percival cracked a piece of pastry between his beak. Rowan heard several people gasp. He did not know whether they were more horrified by the kitchen maid's casual tone or by the fact that Percival had allowed her to touch him. Elsie gently pushed the bird's head away from her pocket. That was for the dining room. Percival immediately reached back in. No. The parrot bit the edge of her apron. Elsie frowned. Rowan's mouth almost moved. Almost. Then Lady Celestine Vale stepped forward. Her pale silver gown shimmered beneath the afternoon light, and her scent white roses and winter mint sharpened with irritation. This cannot possibly count. The spell over the garden broke. Whispers spread instantly. She did not catch him. She is a servant. Perhaps someone trained the bird. That woman was not even entered in the contest. Elsie blinked. Contest? Rowan studied her face. There was no triumph there. No calculated innocence. Only growing confusion. His advisor, Lord Edmund Hale, approached with the expression of a man already regretting every decision that had led him to this afternoon. "Your Majesty," Edmund said quietly, "the old law may be inconvenient. That is a dangerous sentence. It says the royal bird must willingly choose the woman." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "I remember writing caught. You announced caught. The original Moonfeather Charter says chosen." Rowan slowly turned toward him. "You checked this before the festival?" Edmund cleared his throat. Apparently not carefully enough. Percival suddenly flapped from Elsie's shoulder to the top of her head. She closed her eyes. Wonderful. A few servants covered their mouths. Rowan failed this time. A short laugh escaped him. The entire garden went still again. Not because the moment was especially funny, because Alpha King Rowan Duskvale almost never laughed in public. Elsie looked toward the sound. For the first time, her eyes met his. They were warm brown, darker near the center, and entirely unimpressed by his crown. Rowan felt something strange shift beneath his ribs. His wolf lifted its head. Elsie immediately lowered her gaze when she realized who he was. "Your Majesty?" Percival remained on her head. Rowan had never seen anyone bow while wearing a royal parrot. It was surprisingly difficult to maintain dignity. "Bring her inside," he ordered. Elsie looked up quickly. "Am I in trouble?" "No." Percival screamed. "Trouble?" Several nobles inhaled sharply. Rowan stared at the bird. "I am beginning to understand why my grandfather disliked you." Percival clicked his beak. "Trouble," Elsie whispered. "He seems confident." This time Rowan deliberately looked away before anyone saw the smile. Minutes later, Elsie stood inside Moon Hall beneath a ceiling painted with silver wolves and constellations. The flower on her apron looked painfully out of place against marble floors and golden banners. Percival sat on the back of a ceremonial chair beside her. Rowan occupied the throne several steps above. Edmund opened an old leather-bound book. "By the Moonfeather Charter of Alderwyn, the woman willingly chosen by the royal bird shall receive 30 days of courtship before the crown determines her suitability as Luna." Elsie stared. Edmund continued. "At the conclusion of those 30 days, she may be formally considered for marriage to the reigning Alpha King." Elsie's face slowly lost color. Rowan almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You understand?" he asked. Elsie looked at him, then at Percival, then back at Rowan. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." She hesitated. "There is one question." Rowan leaned slightly forward. "What?" Elsie pointed toward the parrot. "Can I give him back?" Silence. Edmund coughed into his fist. Somewhere near the doors, a guard made a suspicious choking sound. Rowan stared at the woman who had accidentally won the most coveted position in the kingdom and apparently wanted nothing to do with it. For the first time since announcing the contest, he felt genuinely uncertain. His wolf, however, was not uncertain at all. It pressed forward beneath his skin, alert and strangely interested. Rowan ignored it. "You may withdraw," he told her. "Immediately, if you wish." Relief crossed Elsie's face so quickly that something inside him tightened for reasons he did not understand. Edmund placed a parchment on the table. Elsie stepped forward. She took the quill. Percival watched. Her hand lowered toward the page. The instant the feather touched the parchment, Percival launched himself across the room. He seized the paper in his beak and flew directly toward the chandelier. "Hey!" Elsie looked upward. "Give that back." The parrot tore the corner off. At the same moment, Rowan's wolf surged violently inside him. A single word thundered through his mind. "Stay." Rowan's fingers tightened around the arm of the throne. His silver eyes flashed gold. And although Elsie did not see it, Edmund did. For the first time, the old advisor stopped looking amused. He looked afraid. By sunrise, every servant in Alderwyn Palace knew the kitchen maid had been chosen by the royal parrot. By breakfast, half the nobles had decided she had cheated. By noon, someone had already started calling her the Apron Queen. Elsie Hart preferred none of those developments. She stood in the center of a guest chamber larger than her entire childhood home and stared at the four women waiting to transform her into someone suitable for court. Silk gowns lay across the bed. Pearls glittered on a dressing table. 3 pairs of shoes waited near the fireplace. Elsie looked at the heels, then at Lady Miriam, the stern woman appointed to supervise her 30-day courtship trial. "I'm expected to walk in those?" Lady Miriam did not smile. "You are expected to glide." Elsie looked back at the shoes. "I would like to begin by surviving." Near the window, Percival made a sound suspiciously like laughter. Elsie pointed at him. "You caused this." The green parrot fluffed his feathers. "Queen." Elsie closed her eyes. "No. Queen. Absolutely not. Queen." Lady Miriam inhaled slowly through her nose. The first lesson began badly. The second went worse. Elsie learned how to bow to an ambassador, how long she was permitted to hold eye contact with a duke, where to place her hands during formal introductions, and which fork apparently existed only for fish. By afternoon, her head ached. The worst part came when Lady Miriam announced dancing lessons. Alpha King Rowan entered the ballroom wearing black. He had removed the ceremonial crown, but that did nothing to make him less intimidating. The late sunlight caught silver along his eyes as he crossed the polished floor. Elsie immediately became aware of every mistake she had made that day. Rowan stopped before her. "Lady Miriam tells me you have made progress." Elsie glanced toward the woman. "That is an extremely generous interpretation." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile. "Your hand." Elsie gave it to him. The instant his fingers closed around hers, Rowan's wolf stirred. Her scent was faint beneath soap, flour, and cinnamon. Warm, soft, troubling. He ignored it. Elsie placed her other hand carefully against his shoulder. Music began. 1, 2, 3, Rowan said. She stepped forward, directly onto his boot. Elsie froze. "I apologize." "Continue." 1, 2. She stepped on him again. Rowan's jaw tightened. Elsie looked horrified. "I think your feet are unusually easy to find." His eyes narrowed. "Is that your defense?" "I'm still developing one." The musicians stared very seriously at their instruments. Rowan guided her through another turn. For 3 miraculous seconds, nothing went wrong. Then Elsie's heel caught the edge of her dress. She stumbled. Rowan caught her around the waist before she hit the floor. Everything stopped. Her body pressed against his chest. His hand rested at the small of her back. Elsie's breath caught. So did Rowan's. For 1 quiet second, his wolf became completely alert. "Closer." The command was instinctive. Rowan immediately released her. Elsie stepped back, embarrassed. "Perhaps we should tell everyone I died honorably." This time, Rowan actually smiled. It was small, brief, but Elsie saw it. And for reasons she could not explain, that smile made the frightening Alpha King look suddenly tired rather than cold. That evening, Rowan intended to return to his study. Instead, he found himself walking toward the royal aviary. He told himself he was checking on Percival. He knew it was a lie. Warm lamplight spilled beneath the aviary door. Inside, Elsie sat cross-legged on the floor with a torn cushion in her lap. Percival had apparently destroyed it. Again. You are expensive for someone who contributes nothing, she told the bird while threading a needle. Percival clicked his beak. Elsie sighed. I suppose we have that in common now. Rowan remained outside the half-open door. Elsie did not know he was there. That was why he stayed. I had a plan, you know, she continued softly. Percival tilted his head. A small bakery near the southern road. 3 tables. Make a small bakery. Maybe 4 if business was good. Her smile turned wistful. I wanted a blue door. Rowan's expression changed. No one in court ever spoke to him about small dreams. They spoke of alliances, bloodlines, territory, power. Elsie spoke about a blue door. And apple bread on Sundays, she added. The kind with too much cinnamon. Percival leaned against her arm. Elsie smiled and scratched gently beneath his feathers. Rowan's wolf settled. Not disappeared. Settled. For the first time in weeks, the restless pressure beneath Rowan's ribs became quiet. He stood there longer than he intended. Then Elsie looked toward the doorway. Their eyes met. She blinked. Your Majesty? Rowan should have invented an excuse. Instead, he looked at the repaired cushion. You so? When royal birds destroy royal property, apparently. Percival squawked. Rowan stepped inside, and without understanding why, the Alpha King sat down. Not on a throne, not behind a council table, on the wooden floor beside a kitchen maid. For the first time, the 30-day trial no longer felt like something he wanted to end quickly. 3 days later, Elsie discovered that royal courtship involved far less romance than she had imagined. Mostly, it involved meetings. Long ones. The morning council chambers smelled of polished oak, sealing wax, cold stone, and the bitter black coffee Rowan preferred when winter reports arrived. Elsie sat near the far end of the table in a pale blue dress Lady Miriam had chosen for her. She hated the sleeves. They were too tight. She also hated the chair. It was carved with silver wolves and looked beautiful, but after 20 minutes her back already hurt. Around her sat 12 men who controlled nearly every important road, grain storehouse, military post, and trading route in Alderwyn. Not one had asked her opinion. Elsie was perfectly comfortable with that. She had spent most of the morning trying to understand why anyone needed 6 different maps to discuss flour. Lord Harrington, Minister of Provisions, tapped one finger against a report. The northern harvest was 12% lower than expected. Another councilman nodded. Then reduce winter distribution to the servants' districts by 10%. Elsie looked up. Rowan remained silent at the head of the table. His silver eyes moved across the documents before him. Lord Harrington continued. The palace staff can also tolerate smaller bread portions. Military stores must remain protected. Elsie's fingers tightened in her lap. She told herself not to speak. She was a kitchen maid, sitting among powerful alphas. No one wanted her opinion. Then Harrington added, if necessary, replace wheat flour with cheaper filler grain. Elsie frowned. They already did. Silence fell. Every head turned toward her. Elsie immediately wished Percival would fly through the window and create a distraction. Unfortunately, the parrot was nowhere nearby. Lord Harrington stared. Excuse me? Elsie swallowed. The kitchen already replaced part of the wheat flour. Rowan's gaze sharpened. How much? Elsie looked at him. Nearly a third, Your Majesty. Harrington shook his head. That is impossible. Elsie's nervousness disappeared. She knew kitchens. You had barley delivered from Westbrook 18 days ago. The minister blinked. The shipment was intended for livestock reserves. It was moldy. A murmur moved around the table. Elsie continued carefully. Not enough to poison anyone, but enough that the stable master refused most of it. The kitchens bought what remained after it was dried and cleaned. Rowan's expression hardened. Why? Because wheat prices rose again. Nobody answered. Elsie looked between the men. You knew that, didn't you? Lord Harrington shifted in his chair. Market fluctuation is expected during winter preparation. Elsie stared at him. In the market, perhaps. Her voice remained soft. But in the servants' hall, it means people stop eating breakfast. That silenced the room. Rowan leaned back slowly. Explain. Elsie hesitated. Then she did. The laundry women had begun sharing meals. 2 stable boys were sending part of their wages home because their village mill had closed. Old Thomas from the boiler room had fainted last week after working through lunch. The kitchen assistants had quietly increased soup portions because bread could no longer stretch through the evening. Elsie knew because she had served them. She knew names, faces, who had children, who had sick parents, who pretended not to be hungry. The council had numbers. Elsie had people. Lord Harrington cleared his throat. With respect, Your Majesty, isolated hardship should not dictate national policy. Elsie looked down. She had already said too much. Then Rowan spoke. Neither should comfortable men who never miss supper. The room froze. His tone had not risen. It did not need to. Rowan turned toward Harrington. Review palace grain distribution immediately. No reductions will be made to servants' rations. Harrington bowed his head. Yes, Your Majesty. And send auditors to the northern storehouses. Another councilman frowned. That seems excessive. Rowan's wolf stirred beneath his calm. It was not a suggestion. The matter ended, but Rowan kept watching Elsie. She seemed uncomfortable with the attention. Not pleased, not triumphant, just worried she had caused trouble. Later that evening, Elsie returned to the kitchen. It was the only place in the palace that still felt familiar. Firelight warmed the stone walls. Copper pans hung above the work tables. The air smelled of baked apples, rosemary, yeast, and cinnamon. She had just begun kneading dough when a shadow fell across the table. Elsie looked up. Rowan stood there. No guards, no council, just the Alpha King in a dark coat. She nearly dropped the dough. Your Majesty, why did no one tell me? Elsie wiped flour from her fingers. About the food? Yes. She thought for a moment. Because kings usually hear reports. I receive hundreds. Exactly. Rowan's brows drew together. Elsie gave him a small, tired smile. Reports tell you how much grain is missing. She pressed her palm gently into the dough. They don't tell you which grandmother gave her supper to a 6-year-old. Something in Rowan's face changed. For 15 years, people had brought him problems measured in percentages, taxes, borders, and military strength. Elsie measured them in empty plates. He looked toward the warm kitchen. Do people truly skip meals here? Sometimes. Why was I not told? Elsie looked at him then. Really looked. And she saw something unexpected beneath the authority. Guilt? She softened. Because no one ever asks the kitchen maid what she thinks. Rowan said nothing, but that sentence followed him long after he left. And for the first time, he began to wonder whether Alderwyn needed a woman who knew how to wear a crown or one who understood who went hungry beneath it. The rain came without warning. One moment, Elsie stood beside the palace herb gardens listening to Lady Miriam explain which medicinal plants were reserved for royal healers. The next, thunder rolled over Alderwyn, and cold autumn rain swept across the courtyard in silver sheets. Servants hurried for cover. Guards pulled cloaks over their shoulders. Elsie gathered her skirts and ran toward the nearest stone archway. She almost made it. Almost. Her shoe slipped on the wet path. A strong hand caught her elbow before she hit the ground. Elsie looked up. Rowan stood beside her. Rain darkened his black hair and soaked the shoulders of his coat. His expression was unimpressed. You seem determined to fall in every part of my palace. Elsie pushed wet curls from her face. I like consistency. For a moment, his mouth nearly curved. Then the wind shifted, and everything changed. The rain had washed away the familiar scents that usually clung to Elsie. Flour, cinnamon, wood smoke, kitchen herbs. Even the lavender soap used in the servants' quarters had faded beneath the storm. What remained was something Rowan had never smelled clearly before. Warm baked apple, vanilla, pear blossom, and the deep, clean scent of earth after rain. Rowan stopped breathing. His wolf slammed forward inside him. Matey. The word was not spoken. It did not need to be. It tore through his mind with ancient certainty. His hand tightened around Elsie's arm. She noticed immediately. Your Majesty? Rowan released her as though burned. He stepped backward. His silver eyes flashed gold. Elsie's expression changed. She knew enough about alpha wolves to recognize that color. Something inside him was dangerously close to the surface. Did I do something? No. His voice came rougher than usual. The rain struck the stone around them. Water ran from Elsie's hair along her neck. Her scent grew stronger. Rowan's wolf surged again. Closer. Claim. Protect. Rowan clenched his jaw. No. He had spent 15 years controlling armies, borders, rival packs, and his own instincts. He would not lose control beneath an archway because a kitchen maid smelled like rain and warm apples. Elsie took a cautious step back. I can leave. His wolf growled violently at the thought. Rowan's fingers curled. You should. The words came colder than he intended. Elsie went still. Something small in her expression closed. Of course. She lowered her eyes and hurried through the rain. Rowan watched her go. Every instinct inside him screamed to follow. He did not. That night, he stood alone in his private chambers while thunder rolled beyond the windows. Edmund Hale entered without ceremony. He had served Rowan long enough to recognize when silence was dangerous. You dismissed the evening council. Yes. You threatened a guard for opening a window. He opened it. Edmund looked toward the closed window. That is generally what windows are for. Rowan said nothing. Edmund studied him. Then his expression sharpened. Your eyes changed. Rowan turned away. Leave it. Was it her? Silence. Edmund exhaled slowly. Elsie? Rowan's wolf stirred at her name. That was answer enough. Edmund lowered his voice. Mate? Rowan finally looked at him. Yes. The word felt heavier spoken aloud. Edmund sat down. For several seconds, even he had no clever response. Then he said, the council will celebrate. No. They have spent years demanding you find a Luna. They demanded a political marriage. Rowan walked toward the window. Rain blurred the palace lights below. They will not celebrate a kitchen maid. Edmund's expression softened. Do you? Rowan did not answer. That question was worse. He barely knew Elsie. He knew she hated formal shoes. He knew she preferred too much cinnamon in apple bread. He knew she remembered servants by name and cared more about empty plates than royal etiquette. He knew his wolf became quiet when she was near, and now he knew fate had tied her to him. But Rowan had never trusted fate. His parents had believed in alliances. They had died because one failed. His uncle had believed blood made men loyal. It had not. Rowan had survived by controlling what could be controlled. A mate bond was the opposite of control. I will say nothing, he decided. Edmund frowned. For how long? Until I understand what this means. Across the palace, Elsie sat beside a small fire in her room, drying her hair with a towel. Percival watched from his perch. She tried not to think about Rowan's face beneath the archway. The golden eyes. The sudden distance. The cold command telling her to leave. Perhaps her omega scent had offended him. Perhaps whatever temporary amusement he had found in her had finally ended. Percival climbed down and nudged her wrist. Elsie smiled faintly. At least you still tolerate me. The parrot tilted his head. Then, in Rowan's deep voice, he said one word. Stay. Elsie froze. Percival repeated it. Stay. She looked toward the dark window. Across the palace, Rowan stood beneath the same storm, fighting the same word inside his chest. Neither of them understood yet that the 30-day trial was no longer deciding whether Elsie could become Luna. It was deciding whether an alpha king who controlled everything could survive loving the one woman he could never command. For the next 4 days, Rowan avoided Elsie with the precision of a military campaign. He changed the hour of his morning meetings. He stopped visiting the Eastern Garden. He sent Lord Edmund to supervise 2 of her courtship lessons. He even took his dinner in the council chamber, instead of the private dining room. It should have worked. It did not. Because avoiding Elsie did absolutely nothing to stop him from noticing her. Her scent lingered in corridors long after she had passed. Warm apple, vanilla, pear blossom, rain. Every time Rowan caught even the faintest trace of it, his wolf immediately lifted its head. Mate. Rowan ignored the word. His wolf ignored him. On the 5th evening, Rowan found himself standing outside the royal aviary again. He stared at the door. This is ridiculous. His wolf pressed forward. Inside. No. Inside. I have work. A low growl rolled beneath his ribs. Rowan closed his eyes. He had commanded cavalry charges with less resistance. Then laughter drifted through the door. Elsie. The sound was soft and unexpected. Rowan's hand was on the handle before he had consciously decided to move. He entered. Elsie sat near the open window with Percival perched beside her. She wore a simple cream dress instead of one of Lady Miriam's elaborate gowns. a basket of mending, rested beside her feet. Percival had somehow wrapped a strip of blue ribbon around his neck. Elsie pointed at him. "You are not a duke." "Duke," Percival shouted. "You have no land. Mine. You cannot declare everything yours." Rowan stopped. Percival turned immediately. "Stay." Elsie looked over her shoulder. Their eyes met. The warmth disappeared from her smile. "Your Majesty?" The change bothered Rowan more than it should have. Before the rainstorm, she had spoken to him naturally. Now there was careful distance in every movement. He had created it. "Continue," he said. Elsie looked confused. "With what?" "Your argument with the bird." "I was losing." Percival puffed proudly. "Mine." Rowan's mouth twitched. Elsie noticed. For 1 second, the old ease returned. Then she looked down again. Rowan hated that too. He moved farther inside. A cold draft entered through the open window. Elsie shivered. Rowan crossed the room and closed it immediately. She watched him. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." The answer came too quickly. His wolf approved. Elsie lowered her gaze to the ribbon in her hands. Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, not entirely uncomfortable either. Rowan noticed a leather glove on the table. His glove. The seam along one finger had been torn during sword practice 2 days earlier. Now it had been carefully repaired with dark thread. He picked it up. "You did this?" Elsie shrugged. "It was damaged." "You were not asked." "No." "Then why?" She looked at him as though the answer were obvious. "Because it needed fixing." Something tightened in his chest. People repaired things for Rowan because they were ordered to. Elsie had done it because she had noticed. He put the glove on. The stitching fit perfectly. "Thank you." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, as if she had not expected the words. "You're welcome." Percival suddenly hopped onto the table. "Stay." Neither of them moved. The bird tilted his head. "Stay." Elsie smiled faintly. "He learned that recently." Rowan looked at Percival. Unfortunately, he knew exactly where the bird had learned it. 2 nights earlier, Rowan had passed the aviary while Elsie was leaving. He had stood alone in the corridor after she disappeared around the corner and quietly spoken the word his wolf had been repeating for days. "Stay." Apparently Percival had been listening. Elsie scratched beneath the bird's feathers. "I think he doesn't like being alone." Rowan's expression changed. "Neither do I." The thought came before he could stop it. He had spent 15 years believing solitude was simply the price of power. A king could not be careless, could not trust easily, could not need too much. But now one Omega with flower on her sleeves had somehow made the palace feel emptier whenever she was absent. Elsie stood. "I should go. Lady Miriam wants me rested for tomorrow." Rowan's wolf immediately became restless. "Stay." His jaw tightened. He would not command her. "Good night, Elsie." She paused. It was the first time he had used her name without title or formality. Her scent warmed slightly. "Good night, Rowan." She froze the instant his name left her mouth. So did he. "I'm sorry." "No." His voice softened. "Don't be." Elsie left. Rowan remained beside the window. Percival watched him. Then the parrot spoke in Rowan's exact voice. "Stay." Rowan slowly turned his head. Percival blinked. For once, the Alpha King had no argument. Because the truth had become painfully simple. The farther Rowan tried to move from Elsie, the more every instinct inside him found its way back to her. The 7th day of Elsie's courtship trial began with 6 polished carriages, 3 dozen guards, and one very nervous kitchen maid trying not to wrinkle her gloves. The royal delegation had traveled to the western square of Alderwyn City, where citizens were permitted to bring petitions directly before the crown. Lady Miriam had spent the entire morning teaching Elsie exactly how a future Luna was expected to behave. Stand straight. Smile gently. Never interrupt. Never kneel. Never touch anyone unless protocol allowed it. Elsie had remembered almost none of that. Rowan stood beside her beneath a silver canopy while the first families approached. Lady Celestine was there as well, dressed in pale blue silk, every movement elegant and practiced. She greeted an elderly merchant with flawless courtesy. She complimented a farmer's harvest. She remembered to smile at the correct moments. The crowd approved. Elsie watched quietly. This, she thought, was what a queen looked like. Then, An old woman near the front dropped her basket. Apples rolled across the stone. A loaf of bread landed in a puddle. One of the guards stepped forward, but Elsie was already moving. She forgot Lady Miriam's instructions, forgot the watching nobles, forgot Rowan. She simply crouched and began gathering apples. The old woman stared. "My lady, you shouldn't. I was a kitchen maid last week," Elsie said. "I think I can survive an apple." A few people laughed softly. Rowan heard it. So did Celestine. Elsie picked up the ruined loaf and frowned. "You can't use this. It was for my grandchildren." The woman's voice was embarrassed. Elsie looked toward the food tables prepared for the royal delegation. She stood and handed the basket to a servant. "Replace the bread. Add 2 more loaves." Lady Miriam stiffened. Elsie noticed. Was that against protocol? Technically. Rowan interrupted. "Do it." The servant bowed and hurried away. The petitions continued. A blacksmith complained that the bridge across South Creek had become dangerous. One council clerk began explaining that repairs had already been scheduled for spring. Elsie looked at the blacksmith. "Which bridge?" "The old stone one beyond Mill Road." Her expression changed. "The western support is cracked." The man blinked. "You've seen it?" "I crossed it every week when I delivered bread to my aunt." She turned toward Rowan. "If wagons are still using it, spring may be too late." The clerk looked irritated. "Your Majesty, engineers have already inspected." "When?" Rowan asked. 4 months ago." The blacksmith shook his head. "The last flood damaged it again." Rowan's gaze hardened. "Send another inspection tomorrow." "Yes, Your Majesty." Elsie said nothing more. But people had begun watching her differently. Not as the ridiculous kitchen maid chosen by a bird. As someone who understood the roads they walked. A young mother approached next with a little boy hiding behind her skirt. The child coughed weakly. Elsie recognized her immediately. "Mary?" The woman's eyes widened. "You remember me? You worked in the palace laundry 3 years ago." Elsie crouched instinctively beside the boy. Lady Miriam whispered sharply behind her. "Elsie." She remembered. A future Luna was not supposed to kneel in the street. Elsie stayed where she was. She touched the child's forehead carefully. "Is this Thomas?" Mary nodded. "He has been sick since last week." Elsie looked toward the royal physician. Could someone examine him? The physician hesitated only a moment before Rowan gave a silent nod. As the boy was led away, Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Elsie smiled. "Of course." Rowan watched her stand. There was mud on the hem of her expensive dress. One glove was stained with apple juice. Her hair had begun escaping its careful pins. Lady Miriam looked close to despair. Celestine looked furious. And Rowan could not remember ever seeing anyone look more naturally suited to stand beside him. That realization frightened him, because Elsie was failing nearly every lesson court had given her. Yet every citizen who left the square remembered her name. Not because she had dazzled them, because she had listened. Later, inside the carriage, Elsie stared at her stained gloves. "I was terrible." Rowan turned toward her. "What?" "I forgot half the rules." "You forgot nearly all of them." She sighed. "Thank you. That helps." His mouth twitched. Elsie looked through the window. Celestine knew exactly what to say. "Yes." She looked like a Luna. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She looked like someone trained to look like one." Elsie turned. His silver eyes held hers. "You knew the woman's name." "Mary?" "You remembered her after 3 years." Elsie shrugged. "She used to burn her fingers on the laundry irons." "You knew the bridge." "I've crossed it." "You noticed a sick child before my physician did." Her expression softened. "That doesn't make me a queen." "No." Rowan's wolf stirred warmly beneath his ribs. "It makes you something the palace has been missing." Elsie stopped breathing for half a second. Rowan looked away before he said more than he intended. Outside, Alderwyn passed beneath golden evening light. And for the first time, Elsie wondered if perhaps becoming Luna was not about learning how to belong above everyone else. Perhaps it was about refusing to forget the people below. Rowan, meanwhile, faced a far more dangerous truth. The 30 days he had designed to prove Elsie did not belong beside him were beginning to prove exactly the opposite. By the 18th day of the courtship trial, Elsie had stopped counting how many people whispered when she entered a room. Some called her charming. Others called her dangerous. A few still called her the Apron Queen when they thought she could not hear. Lady Celestine Vale never whispered. She preferred wounds delivered clearly. That afternoon, pale winter sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Moon Gallery, turning the marble floor almost white. Elsie had just finished another etiquette lesson when Celestine appeared beside one of the carved pillars. Her silver-blue gown whispered over the floor. "You are improving," Celestine said. Elsie glanced behind herself. "I assume you mean me. There is no one else here. That has never stopped people from insulting me indirectly." Celestine's smile was thin. "I understand why he finds you entertaining." Elsie's expression changed. "Rowan, you have become comfortable using his name." Heat touched Elsie's cheeks. Celestine noticed. "Of course she did. You actually believe this means something." Elsie straightened. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Celestine moved toward the window. Outside, bare branches trembled beneath a cold wind. Far below, servants crossed the courtyard carrying baskets toward the kitchens. "You think the contest brought you here because fate wanted you here." "I never said that." "No, you merely look at him as though you were beginning to hope." That struck closer than Elsie wanted. She looked down at her hands. Celestine continued. "Did Rowan ever tell you why he created the contest?" Elsie frowned. "It was an old Moonfeather tradition." Celestine laughed softly. "Oh, Elsie." Something about the sound made her stomach tighten. The tradition was old. The courtship condition was not. Elsie slowly looked up. Celestine turned toward her. The council had been demanding Rowan choose a Luna for months. He refused every suitable woman brought before him. Elsie remained silent. So he created a game he believed no one could win. The room suddenly felt colder. Celestine stepped closer. "Percival hates strangers." Rowan knew it. Everyone close to him knew it. Elsie remembered the festival. Rowan beneath the pavilion. His relaxed posture. The faint amusement in his eyes while noblewomen chased the bird. Her heartbeat slowed. He expected the bird to escape. Exactly. And then? Celestine's gaze sharpened. "Then you walked out of the kitchen." Elsie said nothing. "He did not create that contest because he wanted a queen." Celestine's voice softened, almost kindly. "He created it because he wanted to avoid one." The words settled painfully. Elsie remembered Rowan telling her she could withdraw immediately. The parchment, his distance after the rain, the strange tension whenever she moved too close. All the moments she had begun treasuring suddenly felt foolish. The repaired glove, the quiet nights in the aviary, the carriage ride after the city petitions. The way he had told her the palace had been missing someone like her. Had she misunderstood everything? Celestine watched the realization spread across her face. "You were never supposed to be here." Elsie swallowed. "That is enough. But you should know what everyone else already knows." Celestine moved past her. "To Rowan, you were an accident." Then she left. Elsie remained alone in the gallery. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. For the first time since entering the royal wing, she desperately missed the kitchen. Not the crown lessons. Not the beautiful dresses. Not the rooms filled with gold. She missed warm ovens. Flour on her sleeves. People who never pretended she belonged somewhere she did not. That evening, Rowan found her in the old baking room beside the servants' hall. She stood at a wooden table kneading dough harder than necessary. He stopped in the doorway. "You disappeared from dinner." "I wasn't hungry." His wolf immediately sensed the difference. Her scent carried hurt beneath cinnamon and yeast. Rowan stepped closer. "What happened?" Elsie kept working. "Why did you create the Moonfeather contest?" He went still. That was enough. She looked at him. "Please don't make me ask twice." Rowan's jaw tightened. "The council was pressuring me to marry. And you did not want to." "No." "So, you created a contest you believed nobody could win." Silence answered her. Elsie let out a small breath. "Celestine told me the truth. I should have told you." "Yes." There was no anger in her voice. That somehow hurt him more. Elsie wiped flour from her hands. "If Percival had not flown toward me that day, would you ever have noticed me?" Rowan opened his mouth, then stopped. He could command armies without hesitation, but he refused to lie to her. "No." Elsie's eyes glistened. He stepped forward. "But now, that wasn't my question." She smiled faintly, painfully. And I think I finally understand. You understand nothing. Then tell me. Rowan froze. Tell her she was his mate. Tell her his wolf wanted her near every hour. Tell her the palace felt colder whenever she left a room. The words crowded his throat. But fear stopped him. Fear of the council. Fear of what the bond meant. Fear that once spoken, nothing could ever return to what it had been. Elsie waited. Rowan said nothing. Her face softened with disappointment. That silence became his answer. She untied the apron around her waist. When the 30 days are finished, I'm leaving. His wolf slammed against him. No. Rowan's hand curled at his side. Elsie, I had a life before that bird chose me. She looked at him one last time. And I think I would like it back. Then, she walked past him. Rowan did not stop her. But after the door closed, a low growl rolled through the empty kitchen. Because for the first time, the Alpha King understood something more frightening than losing control. He was beginning to lose her. For 2 nights, Rowan did not sleep. The palace continued around him as though nothing had changed. Guards changed shifts. Servants carried breakfast trays through candlelit corridors. Council bells rang at the same hours they always had. But inside Rowan, something had gone terribly wrong. Elsie was still in the palace. He could smell her sometimes. Faint traces of warm apple, vanilla, pear blossom. Every time her scent drifted through a corridor, his wolf surged toward it with painful urgency. Mate. Stay. Claim. Rowan refused all 3 commands. On the 3rd morning, Edmund found him, standing over an untouched breakfast. You look terrible. Rowan did not turn. That is becoming a dangerous habit. I prefer honesty. Edmund closed the study door. Then be honest with yourself. Rowan's jaw hardened. This conversation is finished. It has not started. Edmund crossed the room. You told me Elsie is your mate. Yes. And she intends to leave. Rowan's fingers tightened around the edge of his desk. Yes. Then tell her. Silence. Edmund stared at him. You are the Alpha King of 12 packs, Rowan. You have faced rebellions, assassins, border wars, and one particularly angry foreign duchess. She threw a wine glass at your head. She missed. That is not the point. Rowan finally looked at him. Edmund's humor disappeared. The bond gives you legal standing. If you announce it, the council cannot simply dismiss her. That is exactly why I will not. Edmund frowned. Rowan walked toward the window. Below, winter sunlight lay pale over the courtyard. If I tell her now, what choice does she have? She could still refuse. Could she? His voice lowered. She is an Omega kitchen maid. I am her king. Edmund said nothing. Rowan continued. If I stand before the court and declare that fate has chosen her for me, every voice around her will tell her what she should feel. He looked down at his hands. My wolf will tell her. The law will tell her. The kingdom will tell her. His expression hardened. And I will never know whether she stayed because she wanted me or because there was nowhere left for her to go. Edmund studied him for a long moment. That sounds almost reasonable. Rowan glanced over. Almost? You are still a coward. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Edmund lifted one shoulder. You are protecting her choice, yes. He paused. But you are also protecting yourself from hearing her make it. That struck harder than Rowan expected. Before he could answer, a knock came at the door. A royal clerk entered and bowed. Your Majesty, Lady Celestine and Lord Vale, request an emergency audience. Rowan already disliked the sound of it. Minutes later, the council chamber filled. Lord Vale stood near the center with several nobles behind him. Celestine sat beside her father, perfectly composed. Rowan noticed Elsie was absent. Speak, he ordered. Lord Vale bowed. The courtship trial has become damaging. Rowan's eyes cooled. To whom? To the dignity of the crown. A few councilmen murmured agreement. The woman is untrained, low-born, and already causing unrest among noble houses. She has caused no unrest. Her presence has. Rowan's wolf stirred. Careful. Lord Vale continued. Rumors are spreading that servants may rise above ancient bloodlines simply by gaining royal favor. Is that what frightens you? The room became quiet. Lord Vale's face tightened. This is not about fear. No? Rowan leaned back. It sounds remarkably like fear. Celestine spoke gently. Your Majesty, People close to Elsie have already suffered because of the attention. That got his attention. What people? A councilman cleared his throat. 2 kitchen workers were denied transfers. A laundry supervisor dismissed a cousin of hers yesterday. Several merchants have refused service to staff associated with her. And Rowan became very still. Names. The councilman hesitated. Your Majesty. Names. His wolf pushed beneath his skin. The temperature in the room seemed to fall. Celestine watched him carefully. This reaction was too strong, too personal. That realization entered her eyes. Rowan noticed. So did Edmund. Danger. By evening, Rowan had ordered every retaliation investigated. But the damage had already reached Elsie. She stood in the servants' courtyard beside Marta, an older kitchen woman who had helped raise her after her mother died. Marta's eyes were red. They dismissed your nephew? Elsie asked. Only temporarily. Because of me. No. Marta. The older woman looked away. Elsie's chest tightened. She had told herself she could endure whispers, cruel smiles, even humiliation. But not this. Not people she loved paying for something they had never chosen. That night, Elsie returned to her old room in the servants' wing. Percival followed her. He sat quietly on the windowsill while she folded her plain dresses into a wooden trunk. No silk, no pearls, no ceremonial gloves, just the things that belonged to her. Percival watched. Stay, he said softly. Elsie stopped. Her hands rested on the folded apron. I can't. Stay. She looked at the bird. Tears gathered in her eyes. I don't want people hurt because a parrot made a mistake. Percival tilted his head. Then another voice spoke behind her. He didn't. Elsie turned. Rowan stood in the doorway. His face looked exhausted. His wolf was dangerously close. But he kept his distance. Elsie straightened. I'm leaving before the trial ends. His jaw tightened. No one will punish your friends again. That isn't enough. I can protect them. I know. Her answer was gentle. That is the problem. Rowan went still. You can protect everyone. She looked at him. But I don't want my entire life to depend on whether the king decides I'm worth protecting today. Pain moved through his expression. Elsie continued. I need something that belongs to me. My work. My choices. My future. Rowan's wolf roared inside him. Claim her. Stop her. But Rowan did not move. Because for the first time, he understood the true test before him. Loving Elsie did not mean keeping her. It meant allowing her to walk away even when every instinct inside him begged him to close the door. The 23rd day of the courtship trial ended beneath a sky the color of iron. By sunset, every noble family in Alderwyn had been summoned to Moonhall. No one knew why. They only knew Alpha King Rowan Duskvale had ordered the full council assembled, the royal guard doubled, and the ancient Moonfeather charter brought from the archives. Elsie stood near the center of the hall, in a simple cream dress. No yevils, no ceremonial gloves, no crown. She had refused all of them. Percival sat on the silver railing above the throne, unusually quiet. Rowan entered last. The room bowed. Elsie did not look at him until he reached the dais. When she finally did, her chest tightened. He looked as he always did before the court. Controlled, powerful, untouchable. Only she noticed the shadows beneath his eyes. Lord Vale stepped forward. Your Majesty, we were told this concerns the courtship trial. It does. Rowan's voice carried through the hall. Elsie drew a slow breath. Then she stepped forward before courage could leave her. I wish to withdraw. Whispers broke instantly. Lady Celestine's eyes sharpened. Several councilmen exchanged satisfied looks. Rowan remained still. Elsie continued. I entered this trial because an old law said I had to remain unless I formally withdrew. Her hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together. I never intended to embarrass the crown. I never wanted anyone punished because of me. Her gaze moved briefly toward the servants standing near the rear doors. These people were my family long before anyone called me a possible Luna. The hall quieted. I will not let them suffer because a bird landed on my shoulder. Percival suddenly spread his wings. Stay. A painful silence followed. Elsie looked up at him. Her eyes burned. Not this time. The parrot lowered his head. Rowan's wolf exploded inside him. Mate leaving. Stop her. Claim her. The force of it nearly bent him. His claws threatened beneath his fingertips. Gold flashed through his silver eyes. Several alphas in the room noticed and immediately lowered their heads. Elsie noticed too. Fear was not what appeared on her face. That made it worse. Concern did. Even now, she worried about him. Rowan rose. Every instinct demanded that he cross the hall, take her hand, expose the bond, invoke ancient law, acknowledge her as his mate before everyone. If he did, the council could never dismiss her again. No noble could challenge her place without challenging him. He could secure her beside him with a few sentences. His wolf demanded exactly that. Mine. Rowan stepped down from the dais. Elsie's breath caught. He stopped several feet away, far enough that she would not feel trapped. Then he turned toward the council. The Moonfeather trial is ended. Shock moved through the hall. Lord Vale frowned. Your Majesty? Not merely for Elsie, and of a. Rowan's voice hardened. The tradition ends permanently. Celestine stood. You cannot simply discard an ancient royal custom. I revived it. Rowan looked at her. I can bury it. No one answered. He turned toward the gathered nobles. I created this contest because I did not want to marry. A murmur swept through the room. Elsie stared at him. Rowan continued. I knew Percival would avoid every woman presented to him. Percival made an offended sound. Rowan ignored him. I expected the day to end with no winner. His gaze moved to Elsie. Then she walked through a kitchen door. Something inside her chest ached. I brought her into this court because of a law she did not understand. His expression tightened. I allowed her to be mocked for a game she never asked to play. Lord Vale shifted uncomfortably. Rowan looked toward him. And when people associated with her were punished, some of you mistook my silence for permission. The room became colder. That mistake ends tonight. His alpha scent rolled through Moonhall. Cheddar, black tea, winter smoke. Every wolf present felt the warning inside it. Any servant dismissed, threatened, denied wages, housing, trade, or employment because of Elsie Hart will be restored immediately. His eyes flashed gold. Anyone who retaliates against them from this moment forward will answer directly to me. Lord Vale bowed stiffly. Yes, Your Majesty. Then Rowan did the one thing Elsie had not expected. He turned back to her. You are free. Her lips parted. No demand followed. No condition. No promise she had to make. Rowan reached into his coat and placed a folded document on the table between them. The trial is dissolved. Elsie stared at the parchment. You can return to the kitchen if you wish. His voice softened. Or leave the palace. She looked at him. And if I leave? His wolf roared. Rowan forced himself to answer. No one will follow you. That hurt her more than she expected. She had wanted freedom. Now that he gave it willingly, part of her wished he would ask her to stay. Why? She whispered. Rowan's eyes held hers. Because you are my mate. The truth burned behind his teeth. But he did not say it. Not here. Not while the entire kingdom watched. Instead, he answered with the only truth he could give safely. Because a choice is not a choice if I punish you for making it. Elsie's eyes filled. Behind them, Percival whispered. Stay. Rowan closed his eyes for one brief second. Then he looked at Elsie again. But he did not repeat the bird. He stepped aside. He cleared the path to the doors. And before the most powerful court in Alderwyn, the Alpha King gave the woman his wolf had already chosen the one thing his instincts wanted least. The freedom to leave him. 3 months after Elsie Hart left Alderwyn Palace, the first snow of winter settled over the southern road. Her bakery had a blue door, exactly as she had once described it to Percival. 3 wooden tables stood beside the windows. Copper pans hung above the kitchen counter. Bundles of dried lavender warmed near the stove, and the air smelled of butter, cinnamon, baked apples, and fresh bread. Elsie had named the little shop the Blue Hearth. It was not grand. It was hers. That mattered more. Every morning, farmers stopped for bread before taking wagons into the city. Children pressed their noses against the glass when apple pastries came from the oven. Travelers warmed cold hands around mugs of spiced tea. In pretension, Elsie worked until her shoulders ached. She had never been happier. And yet, some evenings, when snow whispered against the windows and the shop became quiet, she still remembered Silver Eyes beneath palace candlelight. She remembered Rowan standing aside in Moonhall. You are free. He had kept his promise. No royal messenger came demanding her return. No guards appeared outside the bakery. No councilman interfered with her license. Rowan had truly let her go. Somehow, that freedom hurt almost as much as leaving him had. One snowy morning, Elsie was carrying flour from the storeroom when the brass bell above the front door chimed. Just a moment. She placed the sack on the counter and wiped her hands against her apron. Then she turned. Her breath stopped. Rowan Duskvale stood inside the bakery. No crown, no royal cloak, no guards. He wore a plain black winter coat dusted with snow. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. His scent reached her slowly. Cedarwood, black tea, cold winter air. Her heart betrayed her immediately. Your Majesty. Something flickered across his face. Rowan. Elsie swallowed. Rowan. His wolf stirred at the sound of his name in her voice. He remained near the door. He did not approach until she invited him. That was new. Elsie glanced through the window. Did you come alone? Yes. That seems irresponsible. I was told that before leaving. By Lord Edmund? Repeatedly. A small smile almost escaped her. Then she noticed the cloth bag in Rowan's hand. What is that? He placed it on the counter. Apples rolled gently against one another inside. Elsie stared. Apples. I recognized them. Rowan looked uncomfortable. The Alpha King looked uncomfortable. That alone almost made the last 3 months worth surviving. I require instruction, he said. Elsie blinked. In what? Apple pie. She stared at him. You traveled 2 hours through snow to learn how to bake? Yes. Why? Rowan was silent for a moment. Then he removed his gloves. Because the last time I wanted something involving you, I allowed a bird, a law, and an entire council to decide what happened next. His silver eyes met hers. I do not intend to repeat that mistake. Elsie's heartbeat changed. Rowan continued. I came because I wanted to see you. No royal command. No alpha authority. Just truth. Elsie looked down at the apples. And if I tell you to leave? Pain crossed his face. But he answered immediately. I leave. His wolf protested beneath the calm. Rowan ignored it. Elsie studied him. 3 months earlier, he would have controlled the room simply by entering it. Now, he stood in her bakery waiting for permission to remain. She picked up an apron from beneath the counter and tossed it toward him. Rowan caught it. He looked at the faded blue fabric. What is this? Protection. From what? Your dignity. Elsie pointed toward the kitchen. If you are learning pie, you are wearing it. Rowan stared at Hare. You understand that I command 12 packs. And today you are peeling 12 apples. A pausa. Then Rowan tied on the apron. Elsie laughed. He had missed that sound more than he had admitted even to himself. The first apple went badly. Rowan removed nearly half the fruit with the peel. Elsie stared at it. Have you ever held a kitchen knife? I have held knives. That was not my question. The second apple escaped his hand and rolled across the floor. Elsie laughed again. Rowan watched her instead of retrieving it. His wolf became quiet. Not demanding. Not restless. Quiet. Home. The thought came softly this time. Rowan picked up the apple. For the next hour, Elsie taught an Alpha King how to make pastry. He used too much flour. She corrected him. He argued about measurements. She ignored him. When he burned the first crust, Elsie leaned against the counter laughing until tears reached her eyes. Rowan stared at the blackened pie. I have won wars with fewer casualties. That pie died bravely. I dislike your sympathy. You should. Something warm had returned between them. But Rowan did not ruin it by asking for more. He came back the following week. Then again. Sometimes he brought apples. Sometimes books for the small shelf beside the fireplace. Once he repaired a loose hinge without telling her. Elsie noticed. Neither mentioned it. Slowly, she stopped seeing the king who had accidentally pulled her into his world. She began seeing Rowan, the man who drank tea too bitter, the man who hated raisins, the man who went silent when tired, the lonely man who had spent 15 years believing love was another duty someone would eventually demand from him. One evening, snow covered the road so deeply Rowan had to remain until the storm weakened. Elsie found him standing beside the blue door. You really remembered, he said. What? The door. She smiled. I told Percival I wanted one. I remember. Elsie looked at him. You were listening that night. Yes. How long? Long enough to realize I envied a bakery I had never seen. Her expression softened. Why? Rowan turned toward her. Because when you described it, you sounded as though you knew what home felt like. The room became very still. And you didn't? I have today way any on. No. His answer carried no self-pity. Only truth. Elsie stepped closer. For the first time, Rowan's wolf did not command him to take her. It waited. So did he. Elsie looked into his silver eyes. You still haven't told me why you keep coming back. Rowan's voice dropped. Because I am trying to earn the right to. Her breath caught. Outside, snow softened the entire world. Inside the little bakery with the blue door, an alpha king waited without crown, command, or law. And for the first time, Elsie began to believe that Rowan had not come to bring her back to the palace. He had come to find out whether she might one day choose to let him stay. By the time winter began to loosen its grip on Alderwyn, Rowan could make an apple pie without burning it. Mostly, Elsie considered that progress. He still rolled the crust too thin, still used too much cinnamon, and still looked personally offended whenever the dough refused to obey him. But every week, he returned to the blue hearth. Not as Alpha King, not as a man expecting an answer. Just Rowan. And slowly, Elsie stopped waiting for the moment he would ask her to return. Because he never did. Then, one morning, a familiar green shape appeared outside the bakery window. Elsie gasped. Percival struck the glass with his beak. Once, twice, then screamed. Stay. Elsie laughed so suddenly that flowers scattered from her hands. She opened the door. Percival flew straight onto her shoulder. Behind him stood Lord Edmund. His coat was dusted with road snow. Please tell me the palace did not lose him again. Edmund sighed. He escaped because Rowan refused to bring him. Elsie smiled. That sounds reasonable. He has been unbearable. Percival puffed his feathers. Mine. Edmund pointed at him. That word has caused enough trouble. Then his expression softened. The Moonfeather Festival is tomorrow. Elsie's smile faded slightly. I know. The king asked me to deliver no invitation. She blinked. Edmund continued. He said if you came, it had to be because you chose to. That evening, Elsie stood alone behind the blue door for a long time. The bakery smelled of cooling bread and apple spice. Everything she had once wanted surrounded her. Her tables, her oven, her home, and yet home no longer felt like a place with only one address. The next morning, she closed the bakery early. Then, she went to the palace. Moonhall fell silent when Elsie entered. She wore no court gown, only a soft cream dress beneath her winter cloak. Rowan stood near the throne. When he saw her, his carefully controlled expression broke. Only slightly, but she saw it. His wolf surged beneath his skin. Maid. This time, Rowan did not move toward her. Elsie crossed the hall herself. Every noble watched. Celestine was there. So were the council members who had once questioned whether a kitchen maid belonged among them. Elsie stopped in front of Rowan. You learned how to make pie. A ripple of confused amusement moved through the hall. Rowan's mouth curved faintly. I was given excellent instruction. You still use too much cinnamon. I have been told the criticism is unreasonable. It is not. For one precious second, they were not King and possible Luna. They were simply Rowan and Elsie. Then, his expression grew serious. There is something I should have told you months ago. Elsie's heartbeat quickened. Rowan stepped down from the dais. His scent deepened. Cedarwood, black tea, winter smoke. Her own wolf stirred inside her before he even spoke. You are my mate. The words passed through Moon Hall like thunder. Whispers erupted. Elsie stopped breathing. Rowan continued before anyone could interrupt. I knew after the rainstorm in the herb garden. Pain flickered across her face. You knew that long? Yes. And you said nothing. Yes. Why? His eyes held hers. Because I was afraid. The hall went silent again. An alpha king admitting fear before 12 packs was almost unthinkable. Rowan did not look away. I was afraid of what the bond meant. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that if I told you while you were trapped inside that trial, you would never know whether staying was truly your choice. Elsie's eyes burned. Rowan's voice lowered. The bond told my wolf you belonged with me. He paused. but it never gave me the right to decide whether your heart did. Something inside Elsie finally broke open. Not from pain, from relief. Rowan reached into his coat, but he did not remove a ring. He held a small silver key. Elsie recognized it immediately. The bakery? The deed remains in your name. He placed the key in her palm. I purchased the building from the landlord after learning he intended to sell. Elsie stared at him. You bought my bakery? I secured your ownership. You could have simply given me a palace kitchen. I know. Then why didn't you? Rowan looked at the key. Because becoming Luna should not require you to stop being Elsie. Her throat tightened. That was the moment she understood. He was not asking her to trade one life for another. He was making room for both. Elsie stepped closer. I left because I needed something that belonged to me. I know. I needed to know I could choose. I know. And now I have. Rowan stopped breathing. Elsie placed the key against his chest. I choose you. His wolf broke through with a deep, trembling growl. Not possessive, relieved. Rowan raised one hand slowly, giving her every chance to move away. She did not. His fingers touched her cheek. Warmth flashed through the mate bond. Her scent rose around them. Apple, vanilla, pear blossom, rain. Rowan closed his eyes. For the first time in years, his wolf became completely peaceful. Then Percival destroyed the moment. He flew from the chandelier, straight toward Elsie, and landed on the Luna's throne. Elsie turned. Percival. The bird stared at her. Mine. Laughter spread through Moon Hall. Even Edmund covered his face. Rowan stepped beside Elsie. She pointed toward the throne. Tell him to move. Rowan considered the bird, then looked at her. For once, I agree with him. Elsie narrowed her eyes. Careful. I am king, and I know where your pie failures are buried. Rowan laughed. Not quietly. Not privately. The entire court heard it. Weeks later, Elsie was crowned Luna of Alderwyn. But the blue hearth remained open. Twice each month, the queen still worked there. Sometimes Rowan appeared wearing an apron. Sometimes Percival stole pastry from customers. And the people continued telling the old story. They said Elsie Hart became queen because she caught the royal parrot. But that was never true. Elsie had caught nothing. Percival had chosen her first. Rowan's wolf had chosen her second. And the choice that mattered most had always been hers. And this was where Elsie and Rowan's story quietly closed its doors. If you were still here with me after everything they went through, I wanted to ask you something. How many times had you been misunderstood, disappointed, or hurt by someone you trusted and still refused to beg for a place in their life? Elsie was hurt. She felt unwanted. She learned that the beginning of her story had been built on a truth Rowan never told her. But she did not chase him, bargain with him, or surrender her dignity just to be chosen. She walked away. Not because she stopped caring, because she finally understood that love meant very little if she had to abandon herself to keep it. That was where her real strength lived. You could not control who disappointed you, what people assumed about you, or whether someone recognized your value soon enough. You could control what you accepted when you left and whether you chose yourself again. And apparently, it never hurt to own a bakery with a blue door. If that message stayed with you, comment just one word below: dignity. And if you enjoyed this story, a gentle like, share, and subscribe would mean a great deal to Wolf Secret.